Ritter Communications presents the NEA Varsity Podcast, brought to you by Tubetown and NEA Sports. Here are your hosts, Marcus Carlton and Ryan Fletcher.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the NEA Varsity Podcast, episode 9. Ryan Fletcher, Marcus Carlton along here to get you through another week of the high school football season. Ryan, good to have you back, buddy.
Hey, Marcus, happy to be back as always. Man,
the last couple of weeks, Tubetown's had games come right down to the wire. I think we kind of handed that ball off, and you guys had one that wasn't. I mean, it was decided literally as the final buzzer went off and the final seconds ticked off the clock.
Yeah, and that was West Memphis kicking a game-winning field goal against Jonesboro to pull off what would have appeared to have been an upset on Friday night. I wasn't, and I said this last week, I felt like it would be a good game. I wasn't necessarily surprised that happened. West Memphis was picked to win the conference by Hooten to begin the year. They have just had, and as I learned a little bit more about West Memphis going into the game, they had 5 guys out of Tennessee move in, one of which is being recruited by Clemson and Alabama, just to name a couple of teams. He's an offensive lineman. They've got another running back that's committed to Tulane. But as I mentioned, several guys in the summer that moved in from Tennessee, for whatever reason, some became ineligible or quit, and so they've lost some personnel, but at the end of the day, they are still very, very talented. And in what Coach Coleman and defensive coordinator Brad Chester planned for was a quarterback that they have is about 6 foot, 6'1", 240, big guy, really big guy. He's more of a pocket passer. Believe it or not, he can run the ball a little bit. Hard to bring down, but they ran out of the Wildcat, I would say at least 50, if not 60% of the time. And I feel like that really threw Jonesboro for a loop defensively. Jonesboro still only allowed 24 points for the whole ball game. But I think that was a big factor, on top of the fact that Jonesboro just has some real issues offensively, in my opinion. In the 3 games that we've done for them, I just have not really been impressed. I think their strength is their defense. The offensive line, in 2 of the 3 games I've watched them play, Cross Jumper has been running for his life. And that really, really hurt the Hurricane, on top of the fact that they were very inexperienced coming into the year at receiver, and they just don't have. They have one guy that has that true breakaway speed, and that is Dryden Bartels, and they've got some issues offensively, and Cross Jumper, even when those receivers did get open, he was missing some passes, and they just never could get into a flow. They're better at running the football. Cross Jumper is a good runner at that position. But it just didn't bode well for Jonesboro. They dropped a loss on the year, first in the conference, second on the year. So it certainly makes things a lot more interesting now in the 6A conference. So it was a great game, though, Marcus. It really was a true battle at times for field position, and it was fun to watch the different coaching strategies going in. I will say that, and I knew he would, Coach Chester made adjustments at halftime. They didn't look nearly as good out of that Wildcat in the second half. But and I'll tell you something else. West Memphis, Coach Elmore, he had a position where they were up 21-14. It was 4th down and 2 inside the 5, and instead of electing to take a field goal, and if you go back and listen to our broadcast, I was just astonished before it ever even went down that he wouldn't kick the field goal and make it a 2 possession game. They go for it on 4th and 2, and like I say, Jonesboro's got a good defense. They stuffed them. Jonesboro goes down and ties the ball game, has a chance to win the ball game. But I tell you, the key to that was with, I don't know, I'm trying to think, less than 20 seconds, their quarterback hooked up. It was Owens, and I'm trying to think of his last name, and I'm drawing a blank. Owens was his first name, and he hooked up with one of his receivers down the sidelines. One of the best catches I've seen all year, and especially in that specific time of the football game. Down the sidelines, he caught it with his fingertips, basically, and hauled it in, and that set him up for the field goal to win. So, West Memphis still very much in the picture, and their record is not indicative of the type of team that they are and capable of being. Now, with that being said, if they continue to run out of that Wildcat more often, teams are going to prep for that and adjust for it. But, they have certainly thrown a wrinkle into the plans of some people in that conference. So it was, like I say, it was one of the best, if not the best game we've covered all year. And, there are always games that we know going into them that they're probably going to be blowouts. We've unfortunately had 2 or 3 of those this year. But, looking ahead at our schedule the rest of the year, this week we have Pocahontas coming to Trumann. That's a big game. Then we have Valley Nettleton, another big game. And then we close out the battle for the Bell Trophy with Paragould and Tech, which is typically a good game. Terms of, the score being close and that sort of thing. So I feel pretty confident in moving ahead that we've got some great broadcast on the horizon.
No doubt. And I was doing a little bit of research on that game that you guys had this past Friday night just before we sat down to do the podcast. And I know the exact catch you're talking about. And if that receiver is, a half an inch shorter in height or has a half an inch less reach, he doesn't make the catch because he literally caught it on his fingertips. So it was an impressive catch there and ended up being the difference in the game. And, things don't get any easier for Jonesboro. They've got to rebound off of this and get ready for this week.
Well, there's a color analyst in baseball named Chris Welsh. He's a former major league pitcher, and he always describes baseball as being a game of inches. I mean, a ball that drops in fair territory or right on the foul line or a strike an inch off the strike zone, how that can make the difference in a ball game. And the same can be said for football. I mean, it's all about, where you get a spot, or in that particular case, happen to be at the right place just at the right time, hauling in a catch on his fingertips. And it just, like I said, and like you said, if it's any thrown any further or he's any shorter, that catch isn't made, but it was hands down the play of the game. And aside, obviously, from the field goal that the kicker came down there. I'm going to tell you something else. They've got a kicker that he booted that ball up there, and he could have been another 20 yards back, and it would have been through the upright. So, like I say, I just think that I don't think that Jonesboro necessarily overlooked West Memphis by any. I just think West Memphis is a lot better than the record they had going into that football game, 2-4, and reason why they were picked to win the conference, and showed that on Friday night.
Sure, and like I said, it doesn't get any easier for Jonesboro because this week they head down to Searcy to take on the undefeated Searcy Lions. Searcy's 7-0 overall, 4-0 in conference play. Yeah. And you might think that there's a little bit of shine been taken off of this game by Jonesboro losing, but if you look at the conference standings, that's not necessarily true because if Jonesboro comes up and beats Searcy this week, they'll both be 4-1 in conference, and Jonesboro will own the tiebreaker over the two. So technically they would be in first place. But if you look beyond those two, there's a 4-game log jam at the next several positions because you got Pine Bluff, Marion, West Memphis, and Sylvan Hills all sitting there at 2-2. So somebody's going to get left out when it comes playoff time.
Well, that's going to happen. And I'll tell you, and by the way, Owens McConnell was the name of the quarterback, and I believe it was Jamal Creighton that hauled in that catch. He's 6'4", 190, so a pretty tall kid. But to get to your point about that Jonesboro game against Searcy coming up, it's not always smart compare scores and everything, but Cersei thumped West Memphis earlier in the year. Now, that being said, different teams make up folks in different ways, but at Cersei, I got to strongly believe that they're the favorite going into that football game. But Randy Coleman, he knows what's on the line, and he's going to come up with something to try to pick up that win. And one thing I will say, I was hard on their offense. They've got three really good running backs that he's rotating in and out. He'll run Albert George a couple plays, and then DT McDonald, he'll run him a couple plays, and then got about a 5'7", 190-pound Charlie Long that'll come in and run him. And they all, it's hard to determine, who you need out there, and they got fresh legs. The counter to that argument is that nobody can ever really get into a flow. I really see that more for a a quarterback situation than a tailback. But they've got some weapons. They've just got to find a way to use them, and they have got, if they're going to win at all, they have got to get Dryden Bartels more involved in the passing game. And Cross Jumper, he's going to have to he's got to have more time from his offensive line. That's where it all starts. But when they do give him time, he's got to hook up with some of these receivers. And inevitably, that's going to be their downfall if they can't get that offense clicking.
Sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward because, Jonesboro still got a lot to play for in this season. So, but I do agree with you. I think Cersei's going to be the favorite this week coming up. They're undefeated. They're playing at home. However, Jonesboro could very easily come into this game with a chip on their shoulder after dropping one that they probably feel like they shouldn't have dropped.
Yeah, I think they'll do their best to respond. I still like to think that Cersei's probably a 10-point favorite in that ball game. That's just kind of my gut on that. But with all that being said, I'm a Hurricane fan. They're Northeast Arkansas school, and I hope they go down there and win.
Absolutely.
With that being said, I know you had homecoming festivities at Westside.
Yeah, we did, man. It was a weird game at Westside because you've got homecoming going on. You've got all of the, as a lot of coaches refer to them, potential distractions going on that comes along with homecoming, with all the festivities and ceremony and everything. And, it certainly looked like that maybe Westside wasn't 100% dialed in the first half because Cave City came out and took the opening drive, went right down the field, 7-0. Westside comes back, goes 3 and out. Cave City scores again. You look up at halftime, and winless Cave City is leading this game at halftime, 19-7. And everybody at homecoming was just kind of like, what in the world is going on? How is this team winless? Because they were, I'll just put it bluntly, they pretty much did whatever they wanted to do in the first half, offensively speaking. And they had, you could tell that they really knew what Westside was planning to do with the ball on offense. They, they hung on to McPherson pretty well, and Tyler Ray. Both, now they both ended up with really good games, but it just seemed like there was a lot of struggling in the first half. McPherson had one touchdown, the only touchdown of the first half for Westside, but it just, they never could get in that rhythm. Once they get into their rhythm, they're hard to stop. But Cave City did a really good job of preventing them from developing any kind of rhythm in the first half. And, I brought it up briefly on our podcast in the last week's episode about, this could possibly be a trap game for Westside because they're looking to head with the big showdown with Rivercrest. And I think maybe for a half, maybe they did take Cave City for granted because you come into homecoming, you've got all that on your mind, and then you're looking across the field and you see a team that's winless. It's easy to let your mind wander a little bit, at 17, 18 years old and think, man, we got this. These guys haven't won a game all year. We're going to get this and we'll be just fine. And then you get popped in the mouth a couple times. You look up and it's 19-7 at half. And I don't know what kind of halftime speech that Coach Engel gave, but whatever he said worked because Westside comes out in the second half and outscores Cave City 36-7. They end up winning the game 43-26. Now, it's a little bit misleading because the last touchdown that Westside got was on a pick six. I believe Garner picked it off, took it to the house, and then there was Westside kind of ruffled some feathers there at the end of the game because on the last touchdown they went for a 2-point conversion rather than using Luke Walls to kick the extra point. At the time, I kind of scratched my head, but then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, okay, I see what he's doing because if it comes down to a points tiebreaker situation, you may need that extra point there to make the difference in getting to, either win the conference or host a playoff game or whatever. So, but, there were a few ruffled feathers from Cave City over that deal. And if I'm in their situation, I probably feel the same way. So, but it's I did overhear at halftime. I was walking up near the concession stand and I overheard one of the Cave City parents making the statement that the coaching staff had basically started from scratch this week. They had taken everything they had done in the previous week, wadded it up in a big paper ball and threw it in the trash can and started with everything new this week. And you could tell it too, because some of the plays they were having success with, it looked like plays that Westside had never seen before. So anything they looked at on film study, there was nothing there that resembled what they did offensively this week. There was a lot of misdirection and double handoffs that basically caused Westside to get out of position and led to big plays for Cave City. Cave City also had some really good returns on punts and also on kickoffs. So that may be something that might be a little concerning if you're a Westside fan moving ahead in the season, because especially this next week, when you have somebody with as much team speed as what Rivercrest usually has, the last thing you want to do is allow anybody to get out in open space. But, it ended up being a very happy, happily ever after type of homecoming night. Westside comes out second half and, Logan McPherson had another big game. I believe he had around 230 yards and 3 scores. All day, Tyler Ray had another 100-yard game, and he had a score, I believe, in the second half as well. It was just it was a tale of two halves. And you have to feel bad for Cave City because they played so hard in the first half. And it was almost like when Westside started mounting that comeback, you could watch the body language of Cave City, and they just had that, well, here we go, top feeling. It's like you could tell that they had not been in the position they were in very many times, if at all, because it's almost like they were waiting for that domino to fall to, lead them down the path of yet another loss. And I hate it for those kids, but at the same time, I'm happy for Westside that they were able to make the adjustments they needed, because Westside has a lot to play for this season. They are right in the thick of things when it comes to that 4A3 conference, because you've got Gosnell on top with no conference losses. And then Westside's game coming up this week against Rivercrest, the winner of that game takes sole possession of second place. So, they've still got a lot to play for here. And it was, there was a collective sigh of relief once Westside got the lead in this game. I believe they went up 27-26 or 28-26. And then you could just hear, the entire stadium just let out that collective exhale, sigh of relief, because I think they kind of felt like at that point the offense was rolling. Cave City was starting to fatigue a little bit on defense. And when that happens and you've got McPherson, Ray, just back and forth. It's kind of a thunder and lightning combo where, you get used to one style of runner being in there and then they swap it out, and Westside has so many backs. They can keep guys fresh at all times in the running back position because they've got Cunningham, they've got Ray, they've got McPherson. They've thrown Garner back there a little bit. They can keep a fresh body back there and keep you on your toes as far as running the ball. And then you've also got, River Engel played this game, which I had mentioned something about, maybe this is one that he sets out and gets healthy. Westside couldn't afford for him to sit out and try to get healthy in this game. They needed everybody on that team to pull this one out in the second half. So it was, it ended up being a lot closer than I thought it would be, even though the final score doesn't really indicate a close game. It was a much closer game all the way through until that last pick six makes the score a little bit misleading.
Well, when you get in a situation like that where you're trying to, come up with anything you can get, and a lot of times quarterbacks force throws and late game situations, and it's a desperate attempt. And you see scores like that look a lot worse than the game actually was. So, let me just say this too. In looking at Westside and statistics for them, you mentioned that McPherson had 230 plus yards rushing. You know, he had close to the 300-yard game. I believe it was the week before that.
Right.
Over 500 yards of rushing in 2 ball games. That's just, I mean, those are Darren McFadden type numbers.
Yeah, right? No doubt.
He's at 99 carries on the year for 904 yards. He's averaging 9.1 yards per carry and 150 yards per game. And let's also bear in mind, in which we talked about multiple times, that he has not been healthy all year.
No, he has not.
That's the more impressive thing to me. So, I mean, you're looking at a guy that, you know, what is there, 3-4 games left on the schedule? 3?
Yeah,
is that right?
3 regular season games left on the schedule.
He's unless he gets hurt, and good Lord willing that doesn't happen, he's easily going to get 1,000 next week, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And depending on the type of games he has, and they play, you know, they're going to get a 4th most likely if they take care of business. You know, he's going to surpass 1,500 yards this year. And that is just truly, truly impressive by him. And, that's one reason I had the guy on the cover of NEA Sports Magazine, because I felt like, especially from a statistical standpoint, he was going to be one of the best in the entire area. And he is one of the best in the entire area. So it's been fun to keep up with him over the course of this season, especially with such a great story. And you know, it's not a great story that he got hurt, but it's just incredible what he's been able to do. So,
and not only has he been dinged up, but he missed the entire Pickett game. He was out for that entire game.
Yeah. So, you know, add that in against the Pickett team that's not very good. You know, he may have 1,100 yards right now, and we could be entertaining the conversation of him rushing for 2,000 yards in the season.
Right.
You know, that's a stretch probably a little bit, and I say that, I don't know if it's a stretch or not, but it certainly is something that could happen and could have happened, and he certainly could rush for over 1,500 this year. So, like I said, it's that's got to be fun for you and the crew to and Westside fans to watch on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's impressive because you know he gets a couple of, you know, he'll get a gainer for 4 or 5, and then the next one will go for 5 or 6, and then the next one, you know, it'll be 10 plus.
Yeah,
and then the next one he may break it for 40. You know, it's just like he builds on every run, and it's like the longer the game goes, you know, the stronger he gets. And you could say the same thing for Tyler Ray too, because when McPherson is having the type of game where he's getting 150 or 200 yards in a game, you know, that means Ray's not getting nearly as many carries because there's not as many carries available, which means he's even fresher. So when he goes and he barrels through the line like he does, you know, don't get in his way, because first off, he's a hoss and he's going to put you on your backside. But then he's ticked off on top of that because, you know, he's not getting as many carries. So it's like, you know, it's a mad Brahma bull coming through there. And, you know, at my age, there's no way I'd step in front of him. And I'm not sure that I would have at 17 or 18 years old.
Well, and that also needs to be said, you know, and the same that I said going into this season, David Fowler did not have the success that he had without Logan McPherson.
Absolutely.
And it can be said now in that Logan McPherson would not quite have the numbers he has without the added presence of Tyler Ray. I mean, that's just the bottom line, because it forces defenses to keep eyes on 2 players instead of 1.
Absolutely.
And Ray's rushed for close to 700 yards this year. So, you know, between the 2 of them, they're already almost at 2,000. So it's at 1,700 anyway. So, you know, it's impressive.
It is. It's very impressive. And I'll be interested to see how Rivercrest defense prepares to handle Ray and McPherson both, because, you know, Rivercrest, survived in overtime versus a very Jekyll and Hyde Pocahontas team. There's no other way I know to put that than to say they're just Jekyll and Hyde, because you don't know which team's going to show up. Rivercrest wins, I believe, 21-14 in overtime this past Friday night. Heartbreak for Pocahontas, but you kind of have to wonder too if maybe Rivercrest was not looking ahead a little bit to the Westside game, because this time last year we're talking about Westside getting the biggest victory in program history over Rivercrest. So I know there's going to be a little bit of revenge on their minds this coming Friday night over at the Tez. So that's going to be a very interesting game. You've got a lot of storylines going on there. You've got McPherson and his yardage from the last two games, and can he keep that pace up? Tyler Ray still doing his thing. River Engel, how's the shoulder feeling? You've got Rivercrest, and Westside both sitting at 3-1 in conference play, looking up at Gosnell. Westside still has Gosnell coming up in the last game of the season, but you can't look too far ahead. You've got to take care of this one and the next one before you can even consider talking about Gosnell. So, there's a lot,
Looking at that schedule, I'm looking at it right now. At Rivercrest and then at home versus Trumann and Gosnell. That is a game that, if they're not careful, they could go 0-3 in, or if they play really well, to go 3-1 in. I would probably take 2-1 out of those three games and be just fine with it. But this is the true beef of their schedule, and it like you said, it's going to be fun to keep up with your game on Friday night at Rivercrest. That's and as you said. You mentioned Logan and Tyler and Engel and those guys. They're going to have some big time performances if they want to go to Rivercrest and win.
And another piece to this puzzle that we've not talked about yet, to flashback to last year, Westside upsets Rivercrest, and then it was almost like after that game, they had nothing left in the tank, because at that point, they're sitting on top of the conference with games against Trumann and Gosnell left, and all they've got to do is split those two games to win a share of the conference title. And they kind of had a crash and burn there at the end of the season and lost both games. They lost on a heartbreaker to Trumann, and then I honestly believe the hangover from the heartbreak of that Trumann game is really what cost them the game at Gosnell, because we had that game last year at Gosnell, and it was all Gosnell from the kickoff. I mean, it was like Westside they were almost zombified, just kind of going through the motions in that game. So, that's another piece to the puzzle that you've got to throw in there and be like, Westside looking at it, and they don't want to finish. If they happen to pull off the Rivercrest victory, they don't want to do the same thing they did last year. They want to stay focused and bring home that first conference title.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I'll say this, in favoring at the Westside, I don't think Rivercrest is nearly as good as they were last year, and I don't think Trumann's nearly as good. So I think those are two very winnable ball games. I think Gosnell's better than they were last year. And I want to make mention of this. Lewis Ernest is the coach at Gosnell. Started the year off 0-3 in the conference, on schedule in non-conference play, and has done nothing but win since he entered that conference play. The new coach taking over that team, I really questioned, and I'll be the first to admit that I was wrong. I didn't think Gosnell would finish at the top, which is typical for them to do. And I think a lot of credit goes to Coach Ernest and to the Gosnell Pirates, and that they have to be viewed obviously as the favorite. They're sitting 4-0 and at the very top, and I think they've got all the momentum in the world. So, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about them this season, but they deserve a lot of credit for what they've been able to do this year.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. I mean, when you're sitting on the mountaintop, you're sitting there for a reason. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out in this 4A3 over the last 3 weeks here.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, in the conference, they're outscoring opponents 150-78. I mean, they're taking out teams and making it look easy.
Yeah,
so,
they're doubling them up. I mean, simple math says that they're doubling up their opponents on points.
Right. So, but there's lots of football left to be played. Anything can happen. Injuries, unfortunately, happen. So, it for you guys, it's going to be fun. Now, I'll tell you this, Marcus, for us, we're actually staying within the 4A conference, and we have Pocahontas at Trumann, which inevitably could have an effect on Westside.
Yes.
And it's a big game for Westside in which they're not playing in, because, as you mentioned, let's say Westside were to lose to Rivercrest, then they drop to 3-2, and then either Trumann or Pocahontas, whoever wins that game, is going to improve to 3-2. So, I guess Westside has the tiebreaker over Pocahontas because they beat them head to head. Is that how that works?
No, that's the game. They beat Brooklyn. They lost to Pocahontas up there. Yeah.
My bad. So they need, if they have to rely on someone else, they need Trumann to win that game, and then they need to beat Trumann.
Correct. Correct.
So, and who knows? Pocahontas, they've suffered a couple of big losses this year. That actually, I say a couple, 2 or 3 that I think that could have went either way. But I don't know. I think that's going to be a good game on Friday night. Trumann, we had them earlier in the year against Hoxie, and I think Trumann will be a much different team than we saw. I think it was week 2 in the season this year. So be fun to get back there and cover them. And this is only the second time we've ever had Pocahontas for broadcast. The other game, actually, I believe, was last year. It was Pocahontas at Westside. So last year was a down year for them. Pocahontas has returned stronger this season. So looking forward to that game on Friday night and to seeing how Trumann has developed over the course of this season.
Ryan, here's a big key for the Pocahontas game. Over the weekend, or actually prior to Friday's game, Pocahontas lost their leading tackler on defense, linebacker Rob Mason. He's in the top 10 in tackles in the state, and he got injured. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I'm not sure if he got injured in warm up or in the game, but I know he got injured and wasn't able to play. So that's a big loss on their defense right there in the your linebackers are the middle and the heart of your defense, and to lose one is bad enough, but to lose one that's in the top 10 in tackles in the state is that's a big blow for the Redskins to overcome.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And and that's certainly something that Coach Green at Trumann is going to try and take advantage of. And, Trumann has struggled from a defensive standpoint some this season as well. They're a run first team. I would say 80% of the time, and they've got some guys that can really run the football. That Ben Woodruff that runs out of that wing. Then fullback Noah Milligan. He's like a Tyler Ray. I mean, he plows you over, and he's not going to take a loss. So it's going to be, like I said, I'm just very excited to watch them play and seeing them so early in the year and had so many different players playing at new positions or playing at positions that they've had little, if any, experience in the varsity level. And as for Pocahontas, like I mentioned, they had so many injuries last year. You talk about a school that's been decimated by injury over the last 2 years. I would put them up against anybody on that, and I know that's not something they're happy about or Coach Charles Beatty's excited about. So, right. But it's just part of the ball game, unfortunately, and that apparently rings true going into this Friday night with that loss.
Yeah, a couple of great games on our broadcast slates for this Friday night with major playoff implications in the 4A. It's going to be a fun one, and I'm sure that as soon as our game goes to a commercial break, I'll be pulling Facebook up and checking out you guys just to get a score, if for nothing else, just to kind of fill in everybody there who's going to have a second set of eyes, so to speak, on that game when the Westside game is, when there's a dead ball or halftime or whatever the downtime may be.
Well, we need to find a way to simulcast somehow.
Yeah. We got to, I
don't know if we have that capability, but
all of the things that we can get going on, we got to figure out a way to do some kind of split screen or something to where we can get both games going at once.
Or at least during halftime, if one goes to the half before the other or whatever.
There you go.
But like I say, both games, they have consequences for, even for Rivercrest, if they lose, they drop to 3-2, and it's the same scenario for them. So, that it's come the time now in the season where you have to look at the phone and check the scoreboard from around the area to see, who's winning, and because it has ramifications for lots of different teams.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. It's going to be a wild final 3 weeks of the season here in this 4A3, and we'll be here for all of it. We've got all three of the Westside games coming up to finish it out, and so we'll definitely have eyes on the 4A3 as we go through. So let's buckle up and get ready for a wild ride here over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah. Want to remind everybody that they can catch our game. Pre-game will start at 6:30. Again, that is Pocahontas at Trumann. We'll be obviously at Trumann to cover that. You can go to the Suncom Media Facebook page at SONCOM Suncom Media Facebook page, and we'll go live, and then we'll, of course, re-air our game, which I would think there would be some Westside folks that'll want to watch that replay.
Absolutely.
On Ritter Tubetown. So, like I said, looking forward to it. One other thing I wanted to mention before I close my mouth is that, really had more to do with what happened after the football game at Nettleton on Friday night, that we shared on the NEA Sports page. But, just that they picked up a win, a pretty close ball game against Tech, which surprised me. But one thing I love to see is a lot of players will gather around and pray or whatever. The Nettleton Raiders gathered at midfield, and the athletic leader of that program, Greg Rainwater, led those guys in prayer. And, you're not going to find a better leader that teaches boys to become men than Greg Rainwater. And Nettleton got an absolute steal when they got him as their AD. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him. You and I both know Coach Rainwater pretty well, and I think a lot of him, and I think you do too. And I just wanted to mention that before we went off of this.
Absolutely. Hey, Rainwater is he's a first class individual. Even if you take the athletic director part of it out of the equation, he's just a first class individual that, like you said, he's a great one to be able to take some of these boys and show them what it takes to be a man. So I couldn't have said it any better myself than what you just said. So, I'll keep my comments to basically just saying, yep, I agree. And we'll call it good there, because there's nothing there I can add that you didn't already say. So, So you told us how we could watch your game. So if you've got two phones or two devices, put one of them on Suncom Facebook page, put the other one on the Tubetown Facebook page or our YouTube page. Or if you're at home watching, you can fire up your Amazon Fire Stick and put the Tubetown game on our app on Amazon Fire Stick, and then have your phone or iPad or whatever your other device is right there watching Suncom game, and you can have your own little split screen right there at home and keep up with both games, because both of them are going to have major playoff implications this week. So going to be another wild one, Ryan. I guess we'll come back and do this again next week.
Looking forward to it, sir.
All right. For Ryan Fletcher, I'm Marcus Carlton, and this is the NEA Varsity Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the NEA Varsity Podcast, a production of Ritter Communications, brought to you by Tubetown and NEA Sports. Be sure you're subscribed to the NEA Varsity Podcast to get the latest episodes. Tubetown is a community partnership of Ritter Communications.